collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up this week, the Chamber of Commerce exhorts the government to tackle food security.
Definitely, we should try to improve the production of animal feeding and human consumption in order to be self-sustained.
High blood pressure affects more than 1 billion people worldwide, and the slogan for this year's World Hypertension Day is "Measure your blood pressure, control it, live longer."
High blood pressure is the number one risk factor for heart disease, stroke, kidney complications, and premature death.
And the 21st Pharos International Chamber Music Festival kicks off next week.
6 wonderful concerts with a great festival atmosphere with 15 musicians in the Royal Manor House in Kuklia, which is on the coast outside Paphos.
Business leaders last week called on the President to urgently boost the island's self-sufficiency in terms of the food supply. As we all know, higher prices are worldwide and shortages are expected in the very near future. In a letter from the Chamber of Commerce to the President, all of these and many other issues were addressed. To discuss them with us on the programme this week is GEVE's Secretary-General, Marios Chakis. Marios, first and foremost, it was obviously something that is affecting a lot of your members, but also a lot of members of the public as well. So what basically was in the letter?
What we have said basically in the letter exactly is that we are just making a note of the difficulties that the Cypriot economy, and not only the European economy and the economies all over the world are facing nowadays due to the soaring inflation, the increasing cost of anything that has to do with energy, starting from diesel, petrol, anything that used to produce electricity, the major concerns all over the world about possible shortages in the food supply, especially in anything that has to do with cereals, which affects, as you probably understand, both the production of food as well as feeding of animals. And we are trying to give the message that unless we take urgently and on time measures to protect ourselves, first of all, of any possible shortages, and secondly, to introduce members to alleviate all the burden and costs both to the businesses and the private sector and the individuals, we will be having some difficult months ahead.
Now, let's talk, if we may, first about the energy situation, because at the moment that is still very much in flux, isn't it? With Ukraine now cutting off one of the pipelines, Russia cutting supplies to certain EU countries. What sort of supplies do we have in hand should Russia turn off the tap?
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm not in a position to know how much supplies we have in order to last and for how long they can last. Supposedly, according to the EU directives, we should have a minimum of 90 days of reserves in order to keep the country running. But what will definitely happen in case the European Union goes ahead with these very strict restrictions on buying and provision of gas from Russia, we will be facing some difficulties, although by talking to our members who are dealing with the trading of oil, basically, because we are not using gas very much in Cyprus, but oil products, most of the fuel that we are using for our everyday life comes from Israel or Greece. So the businesses themselves, they don't see any possibility of shortages in the market. Obviously, we should expect increase in prices, something we have seen already yesterday. Now, the only difficulty that we may face to some extent is the quantities that the electricity authority is buying for the operation of its power plants, because from what we have been informed, some quantities are coming from Russia as well. But this is something that possibly the electricity authority of Cyprus can comment mostly. So definitely we will be seeing higher prices, but nobody can exclude the possibility of some shortages if this thing gets in immediately. I mean, without having time to find alternative sources of supply.
And now let's talk, if we may, about cereals and grains, because we have quite a lot of livestock farming in Cyprus, and I think that the farmers are getting quite concerned about how long their supplies will last.
Yes, you're absolutely right. There is a major concern all over the world about possible shortages. We are buying these products from Ukraine and Russia, I suppose, to a great extent. There is a big quantity of livestock which needs to be fed, and obviously you cannot stop feeding these animals, otherwise you will lose them. So the government has taken some initiative in the past months, and they have secured a number of quantities to be in stock in order to have some buffer in case things go very wrong. But this is not the end. Depending on the duration of the war, which seems to be there for some months ahead, we should keep trying securing more quantities, because we do have the problem of bringing them in the country as well. As you very well know, there are huge disruptions in the supply chain, plus the transportation of these goods. It takes weeks to arrive to Cyprus, partly because we are a small country, quantities that we receive are small. There is a huge problem in the movement of goods in the sea, so we are not the primary market destination for shipping companies, so we should take this into consideration when ordering. And the second thing we have suggested, we have proposed to the government, is that we should start thinking more seriously on improving and increasing our
sufficiency.
Exactly, in order to avoid the possibility of what I have described before, being left without enough quantities to feed the market, both for human and animal consumption.
Well, I also wonder, I mean, you very rarely hear, except up in some of the more mountainous areas where it's greener, you rarely see herds roaming free and feeding off the land. So are we needing to perhaps change our farming model so that we're not necessarily importing feed that we may in the future also need to feed human beings with?
Yes, well, this is a very specific question which I'm afraid of answering without being an expert in the area. But definitely Cyprus is not a green country like we see in Europe, that animals are free in the fields. We have mostly farm-based production. That's why we depend very much on feeding the animals in their stables. I'm not sure whether we can develop this kind of, agriculture in Cyprus, but definitely we should try to improve the production of animal feeding and human consumption in order to be self-sustained. And this needs to be designed and implemented gradually, because it takes time until you develop new farms or new cultivations and encourage people to go into this business and increase the production that we do ourselves.
What else was in that letter that you suggested we should or shouldn't be doing?
Well, there is a lot of suggestions in the document. What we have stressed mostly is that the government has to use a number of measures in order to decrease the cost to the people of buying certain products, starting with fuels, plus foodstuff, and a lot of other necessary stuff. We suggested that we should probably consider the possibility of lowering VAT rates, something that the Commission is allowing for a specific period of time, temporarily, not permanently, in order to reduce the prices that consumers are paying for a number of products. We have also suggested that we should give emphasis in expanding production of electricity from renewables, especially photovoltaics, in order to make better use of the abundance of sun that we have in Cyprus, in order to be more self-sustained in electricity production, both at home level and industrial basis. To reduce the import duties, of course, this needs to be taken, a decision to be taken at European level for imports of products from third countries, again, in an effort to decrease the cost that people have to pay in order to get some products. There are, of course, specific suggestions to specific sectors of the economy, such as in the trading sector, in production, in the agriculture, in the construction area. So, well, it's not very easy to go through all these suggestions that we have said, but what we have said basically is that the government should ask the European Union, collectively with the rest of the countries in the Union, that they should also put aside a big amount of money to be given as extra support to the countries, to the member states, in order to support their households and businesses to go through these difficult times with the increasing prices. A lot of businesses are having difficulties in keeping their operations normally because as prices increases, consumers are reducing their are losing, and inflation, consumers are losing their purchasing power, they are reducing their purchases, their buys, and this means that companies are selling less, so they do have liquidity problems, plus keeping all their staff, and we hope that nobody will go into redundancies. They have an increased cost which they hardly will be able to stand it for many months. So the government should support their financials in order to pass on this sort of support to the individuals and the companies.
And how far are your members managing, or are they even trying to, not pass on some of these increased costs to consumers? Because particularly lower paid members of society are going to be very vulnerable.
Well, I know that a lot of companies are trying to impose the minimum increases they have to impose because they very well understand that the purchasing power of people is weakening. Of course, there is not much they can do. In what sense? Definitely what they are trying to do is find an average of the new price of the products they received with any stocks they have, so they can a little bit to reduce the level of increases. But at the same time, they have to take into consideration that by selling their stock, they have to get enough money in order to replace it. And the next time they have to import, they know that it's going to be more expensive. And unless they collect the money they need to repurchase the product, they will be having difficulties in financing it. So they are in a very, very, I would say, difficult situation on how to deal with their prices. I have a lot of discussions with our members, and they clearly say that it's a very difficult question to answer. And usually what they do is they sell the product at the price that they are expecting that they will need to pay in order to buy the next time. So this is a sort of an inflationary circuit which unfortunately they cannot avoid. They have been very careful in the beginning with the prices because they had a number of stocks which they could find an average of price with new ones, but nowadays they cannot even get a quotation of the price for the new deliveries from their suppliers. They simply tell them, look, I'm sorry, we cannot give you a price for the next 3 months, we can only give you a price for the next week.
Have you had a reply from the government?
Not yet. We didn't have any reply. I'm sure that the government will go through this. I understand that the Council of Ministers is considering new measures of alleviating these developments for the people. And I'm sure that they will, resort to this document. They will read this document and hopefully will find some of our suggestions as tools to be implemented.
Marios Chakis, Secretary General of the Cyprus Chamber of Commerce, KV. Thanks for joining me.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
May the 17th is World Hypertension Day, and it was marked this year in Cyprus by a press release issued by the Cyprus Cardiology Society. They let us know that 1 out of 5 people in Cyprus suffers from hypertension, and worryingly, an awful lot of people who do aren't aware of it. So I've asked Professor Evagoras Nikolaidis, he's a professor of cardiology and also of postgraduate medicine at the University of Nicosia Medical School, to tell us what the risk factors are and what we should be doing about it. Evagoras, thank you very much for joining me. So can we start with this worrying thing that more people probably have high blood pressure, because that's what hypertension is, I think, than know it?
Actually, worldwide, 1 billion people have high blood pressure. And this is very unfortunately because high blood pressure is the number one risk factor for heart disease, stroke, kidney complications, and premature death. And quite a lot of them, a little bit less than half of them, don't know that they have high blood pressure. And the symptoms of high blood pressure, although there can be many, they are usually absent in most of these patients. So you can call high blood pressure a silent killer, basically.
So what should people be doing? The Cardiology Society suggested that we should all take our blood pressure. I think
the slogan for this year, World Hypertension Day, is measure your blood pressure accurately, control it, and live longer. This is the slogan of this year's Hypertension Day. And it is very appropriate, actually, because nowadays everybody can take their blood pressure with home measurements because there are blood pressure measuring machines that can do that automatically and with only a little bit of training. Again, people should seek the advice of the personal doctor because not all manometers, blood pressure measuring machines, are approved that they are consistent and accurate in their measurement. They must learn a little bit about the process of doing it, and I'm sure visiting the personal doctor would enable them to take their blood pressure there and know if they have to take any additional measures.
I think I'm right in saying, am I, that in Cyprus you can actually walk into a pharmacy and they will take your blood pressure, and I believe there's no charge. Is that correct?
Most pharmacies do that free. Although the blood pressure there is good, just a screening exercise, because a proper blood pressure should be taken with the patient at rest and relaxed, sitting down for about 5 minutes, and with them leaning, resting their arm on the table. This is the proper way as advised by the World Hypertension Society.
All right, so let's talk, if we may, about the factors that put you at high risk, is what we should all know about. Am I right in thinking that diet is one of them, and possibly lack of exercise?
Yes, these are two of the main risk factors. Diet, especially high in salt diet, is a risk factor. Lack of physical activity, yes, is another factor. Obesity, overweight, is another factor. Family history of hypertension is another factor. And kidney, hormone problems, diabetes, and high cholesterol, all these are additional factors.
So you would recommend then that people have a look very carefully at what they are eating. But of course in Cyprus, I mean, we've had very hot weather recently. We sweat a lot and we lose salt when we sweat. Don't we need to replace that sometimes?
This is correct in some instances. Actually, the way we metabolize sodium, because that's the element of salt that causes high blood pressure, varies from person to person, and it is genetically determined, actually. So by measuring our blood pressure, we can know in which group we belong to. But yes, if somebody has a tendency not to withhold salt or are taking diuretics, we usually try to advise or reduce the diuretics in the summer. But that's again up to the doctor to advise them and because there are no general rules. A good medicine is tailor-made medicine according to the persons in front of you, the other diseases that they may have, and also their genetic predisposition.
So we're running out of time. Let's just wrap this up, if we may, Evagoras, by not only suggesting that people do the things you've said, but our doctors are all very busy. Are they really up for their patients coming in, once a month just to check their blood pressure?
The frequency of checking one's pressure it doesn't have to be necessary in 1 month. People with normal blood pressure once a year is enough, for example. But nowadays, by having the personal doctor, the health system in Cyprus, the blood pressure can be taken according to the needs of the patient.
Thank you very much, Evagoras Nikolaidis, Professor of Cardiology and of Postgraduate Medicine at the University of Nicosia.
Thank you for having me.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
The 21st Pharos International Chamber Music Festival kicks off on the 24th of May. It runs all the way through until the 4th of June in 3 different locations. Now, this over the years has been recognised as one of Europe's preeminent music festivals, and the founder of the Pharos Arts Foundation is Garo Keheyan. He joins us now. Garo, remind us about the history first, if you will, of the International Chamber Music Festival, because as I just said, it has become very well known, certainly in Europe and indeed across the world.
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you. Yes, we're very, very pleased and proud that the festival has actually evolved over the past 2 decades into something that actually, yes, is very special. It's recognized throughout Europe as one of the preeminent small chamber music festivals of Europe. And I think the reason is, of course, the unparalleled quality of the concerts and the musicians that come here year after year, and also the unique atmosphere of Cyprus, of the Mediterranean, of the 3 locations that we use. I mean, very early on, I don't know how, I kind of stumbled across the Royal Manor House in Kuklia and decided it would be a beautiful venue. So that's a very, very special place. It's a medieval building, but it's within the Sanctuary of Aphrodite, which is a very, very unique archaeological site. Then, of course, the Olive Grove is also a very, very special, peaceful, beautiful site in the countryside. And the third venue is the shoe factory in Nicosia, which has proved to be, again, a wonderful space for chamber music. So I think it's the locations, the atmosphere. The musicians love to come here because of our food, our hospitality, the Mediterranean Sea, the wonderful hotels we use for the festival. So all in all, I think it's a very sought-after festival.
Now, tell us a little bit about this year's event. As I said, it kicks off on the 24th of May. Can you run us through the programme?
Yes, of course. The first concert will take place in the Shoe Factory in Nicosia, and it will be a cello and piano recital with Alessio Banks, who is one of the world's leading pianists today, New York-based Italian, and of course the artistic director of the festival, Alexander Chaushan, who is a cellist. And it's a beautiful program with Mendelssohn Sonata for cello and piano. And then Alessio will play a Chopin Ballade, number 4. And then Alex will play a solo piece for cello by the American composer, Crumb. And then we will end with a Beethoven for cello and piano. So it's going to be a beautiful program, wonderful acoustic, as you know, in the Shoe Factory. Festival really kicks in proper. The festival atmosphere is really in the 6 subsequent concerts that will take place in Kuklia. And there we have, 15 other musicians joining the group. And this year we have a wonderful French Cypriot residing, I think, in Germany now. And we were planning to bring her 2 years ago, but she has subsequently become a superstar and, is performing with Daniel Barenboim, top ensembles in Europe, and her name is Sara Aristidu. So we're delighted that she's going to open the festival with the first concert on the Friday, the 27th. And then I think she's also going to be performing on the Saturday, the 28th. And then we've got a wonderful lineup. I mean, we've got Freddie Kemp, who's a brilliant pianist. We've got, actually, these things also happen in festivals. You know, we're so stressed these days because there are last-minute problems and cancellations. One of our pianists was indisposed, so she just cancelled a day before, yesterday. And we've been, trying to identify another pianist to replace her. And we're very, very pleased that Enrico Pace is coming again. And he is, again, one of the most sought-after pianists of the world. He accompanies Leonidas Kavakos. So that's the sort of caliber of the artists. We've got Tashin Kashimoto coming, again, the concertmaster of the Berlin Philharmonic. We've got a fantastic lineup with cellist Kirill Zlotnikov and double bass Nabil Shabada, who used to be in the East-West Divan Orchestra with Daniel Barenboim. Now he's the conductor of the Munich Chamber Orchestra. 6 wonderful concerts with a great festival atmosphere with 15 musicians in the Royal Manor House in Kuklia, which is on the coast outside Paphos, between Limassol and Paphos. So if anybody in Limassol is listening, it's very, very easy to get to the Royal Manor House. I know there's a large music-loving community in Limassol as well. And then the final concert will be on the 4th of June in the Olive Grove in Delikipos, which is also the summer home of the Farazad Foundation. And it's a really, truly magical setting. Huge pine trees and lawn areas and ancient olive trees, obviously. So that's the format of the festival.
Now, how much are tickets?
I think tickets are €20, which is extraordinarily, reasonable, I think, because, these festivals in Europe, cost 2, 3, 4 times, if not more sometimes, with the caliber of the musicians that you have the opportunity to listen to. So it's just a symbolic figure. But I'm very pleased to say, I mentioned that some of the musicians will stay on afterwards and give master classes to members of the Cyprus Youth Orchestra. And again, I think this is a wonderful, people should be aware, it's not only the music and the festival, we are making, I hope, a major contribution to music making in Cyprus and encouraging young musicians in Cyprus. And the Youth Orchestra, of course, is a wonderful institution. And we're very pleased to establish this collaboration with them. It's not the first. I think a couple of years ago, the orchestra came to the Olive Grove for the final concert and played with some of our top soloists. So now we're taking it to the next level, and we're going to be offering masterclasses to young Cypriot members of the orchestra, and hopefully, they're helping to contribute to the improvement in the quality of the orchestra and their enthusiasm, I suppose, to be mentored and tutored by some of these artists who are coming. I think it will be a wonderful experience, a learning experience for them as well.
Well, that sounds absolutely great. Let's finish off with where people can buy tickets. Presumably,
these are standard things. It's all over the social media. I think there's a telephone number, our office number, and people can book, and they can buy, of course, online. But the last thing, if I may, I wanted to say was, it's especially, today with the terrible violence that has been unleashed in the world, and in the uncertain times we live in, we really need to, understand and appreciate the importance of music, and especially music of this kind, and especially performed at the highest level. Music is a healing, transformative energy, power. And if I always say this at our concerts, but it is knowledge, and it's culture and education in the broadest sense of these terms that we need. And if we are to create a safer and saner and healthier world, we need to educate young people. We need to certainly educate the political classes. And then, these people who make the decisions, who bring us to where we are, to the danger points that we are in today, I think they would have a different perspective about the priorities of life.
Ending there on a philosophical note, Garo. So let's point everybody in the direction of your website. That's pharosartsfoundation.org, where the whole programme is listed. And of course, you're also on Facebook. Just look for the Pharos Arts Foundation. Garo Kehean, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, Rosie.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.